Every Muslim is taught the exact same thing. The Muhammad of the Quran and the Muhammad of the Hadith are the exact same man. If that is true, they should match. They should act the same. They should teach the same things. That is what we would expect, right? But here is the problem. The Quran calls him a mercy to all the worlds. But the Hadith books show a man ordering brutal torture. The Quran says he is gentle by nature, but tradition says he had men's eyes gouged out with hot iron. So how can the man God calls a complete mercy be cruel enough to leave people to die of thirst in the desert? Today, two Muhammads exist. One Allah described personally, called him a mercy to all of humanity, called him a man of magnificent character, told him directly that if he ever invented even a single lie about God, he would have seized him by the throat and severed his aorta. The other Muhammad was assembled by strangers 200 years after his passing, in the courts of political rulers who needed a particular version of him to exist. One of these men is a noble human. The other was placed under a magic spell by a Jewish man, forgot the words of God, needed divine permission to manage his bedroom arrangements, and had his military commanders execute people while he looked the other way. Both of them are called the Prophet of Islam. Both of them are said to be the same person, but they are not. And by the time this video is over, you won't be able to unsee Muhammad of the traditions from the Prophet of the Quran. Let us start where everything must start. The Quran. Not what scholars said about the Quran, not what narrators reported about what other narrators. The Quran itself. The book that God called complete and fully detailed. The book God said neglects nothing. If Muhammad is the messenger of that book, then that book is where we meet him first, and what the Quran tells us about him. The single most important thing the Quran establishes about this man, because everything else flows from it. Chapter 68, verse 4. 4 words in Arabic. وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. And indeed you are of a magnificent, exalted character. God is speaking directly to Muhammad. Not through an angel, not through a dream. Directly. And the word used is Azim, the same word used for God's throne. Al-Arsh al-Azim, the same word used for the Day of Judgment. Yawm al-Azim, magnificent, immense, of the highest possible order. This is not a compliment buried in a long list. This is a standalone declaration. Everything the Quran tells us about Muhammad sits on that foundation. And everything the traditional literature tells us about him must be measured against it. Now look at what kind of man carries that character. Chapter 21, verse 107. God is speaking about the purpose of sending Muhammad. And he does not say, we sent you to establish an empire. We sent you to collect taxes. We sent you to manage a harem. He says, we did not send you except as a mercy to all the worlds. Rahmatan lil Alamin. Not a mercy to Arabs. Not a mercy to 7th century Muslims. A mercy to all the worlds. To every living thing in every world that exists. That is the scope of this man's mission as God defined it. A mercy, that is what he is. Not a warlord, not a legislator inventing rules God never gave him. A mercy to everything that exists. And then chapter 3, verse 159 shows us what that mercy looked like in human interaction. God reminds Muhammad of his own nature. It is by God's mercy that you were gentle with them. And had you been harsh and hard-hearted, they would have dispersed from around you. This is not a prescription. This is a description. God is telling Muhammad, this is who you already are. You are already gentle. Your gentleness is itself a mercy from me. The people around you stayed because of that gentleness. A hard-hearted man would have driven them all away. The Prophet of the Quran is gentle by nature, by divine design, as a core feature of the mercy he was sent to be. Chapter 9, verse 128 deepens this portrait. God says, there has come to you a messenger from among yourselves. Grievous to him is what you suffer. He is concerned over you, and to the believers he is kind and merciful. This man feels your pain. It lands on him. It costs him something when the people around him are hurt. He is not a distant administrator issuing rulings from a position of comfort. He is inside the experience of the people he serves, carrying their weight, troubled by their trouble. And to the believers specifically, the Quran uses 2 of the names it uses for God himself. Ra'uf, Rahim, compassionate, merciful. God gave Muhammad 2 of his own names to describe how Muhammad treats people. Let that sit for a moment. Now here is something that should stop every person who treats Hadith as a source of legislation in their tracks. Chapter 6 verse 50. God instructs Muhammad to say it himself in his own voice as his own declaration. Say, I do not tell you that I possess the treasuries of God. I do not know the unseen, and I do not tell you that I am an angel. I only follow what is revealed to me. 4 things Muhammad is told to declare about himself. That last one is everything. Only what is revealed to him. Not his personal opinions, not his cultural preferences, not his management style or his bedroom habits or his dietary choices or his views on agriculture. Only what is revealed to him. God set those limits around him. And then the Hadith literature spent centuries filling in everything outside that boundary and calling it divine guidance. Chapter 10 verse 15 makes this even more explicit. When the clear verses of God are recited to them, those who do not expect to meet us say, bring us a Quran other than this or change it. Say, it is not for me to change it of my own accord. I only follow what is revealed to me. Again, only what is revealed. And then in the same chapter, verse 49, God instructs him, say, I have no power to harm or benefit even myself, except as God wills. The man the Hadith tradition turned into a front of independent rulings on everything from how to enter a bathroom to what hand to use for eating. In the Quran, he had no power over his own benefit or harm. The gap between those two pictures is not a gap, it is an abyss. And now the verses that carry the most theological weight of anything in the entire Quran about Muhammad's integrity and the integrity of the revelation itself. Chapter 69, verses 44 through 46. God says, and if he had fabricated against us some sayings, we would have seized him by the right hand, then we would have cut his aorta. Read that again slowly. Had Muhammad invented even a single statement and attributed it falsely to God, God would have destroyed him. Personally, immediately. This is not a warning buried in legal language. This is God drawing a line in the sharpest possible terms against one of his chosen ones. The man who stands on that side of the line, who receives this statement from God, who knows that his very life depends on the absolute integrity of every word he transmits, is not a man who then went around issuing thousands of personal opinions, cultural preferences and management decisions for men to write down and call divine guidance 2 centuries later. The God who says this does not then leave the door open for fabrication on an industrial scale. Now watch what the Quran does next. Because this is where Allah proves to us that he is just a human, not a superhero from whose fingertips wells of waters flow, or he goes on adventures into the sky on a winged horse. God corrects Muhammad directly in the Quran, for everyone to read forever. And the way God corrects him tells you everything about the relationship between them and the nature of the man being corrected. Chapter 80. From the very opening, God saw Muhammad turn his attention away from a blind man who came seeking guidance because he was focused on someone he considered more important. And God corrected him, openly, permanently. It is in the Quran to this day. But look at the nature of the correction. God asks him a question. What would make you know? Perhaps this blind man was the one who needed you the most. The correction of a man God already called magnificent in character, but yet fallible and imperfect, just like any other human being, by a God who loves him enough to correct him, precisely because of that magnificence. This is not a flawed man. This is a human being operating at the highest level a human being can operate, still needing the course correction that every human being needs. And God provided it, in the book, for all time. To shatter any myths for all eternity that might be created around him, to turn him into some kind of demigod to be almost worshipped. Chapter 66 verse 1. The Prophet made something halal into haram for himself. And God stopped him. Why does this matter? Because if Allah had given the authority to the Prophet to legislate independently, if his personal rulings had the force of divine law, then this verse makes no sense. Why would God intervene? If what the Prophet says is automatically binding, then his self-imposed prohibition would simply become law. But God does not let it stand. God says, you do not have the authority to make haram what I have made halal. Not even for yourself. Not even with good intentions. Not even to keep the peace with the people closest to you. That boundary of authority is absolute. The messenger of the Quran cannot make law. He can only convey the message. And the moment he stepped outside that role, even slightly, even personally, God corrected him in the permanent record. Chapter 8, verses 67, a decision made about prisoners taken in battle. God corrects the approach. It was not for a prophet to take prisoners of war until he had thoroughly subdued the land. You desire the commodities of this world, but God desires the next world for you. Another correction. Another moment where the prophet is shown as a man who is capable of making mistakes but being guided back. This is the prophet of the Quran. Real, present, engaged, human, fallible, correctable, and magnificent precisely because of all of that, not in spite of it. And this point is further cemented when Allah instructs Muhammad to say that he is nothing more than a human being like the rest of humanity. Chapter 18, verse 110. Say, I am only a man like you, to whom it has been revealed that your God is one God. A man like you, not a cosmic authority, not a second source of divine law. A man like you. The revelation is what makes him a messenger. Remove the revelation and he is a man like any other man. It is the revelation that honors the man. The revelation is not honored because of the man. Now, we turn to the other Muhammad. And before anyone gets emotionally defensive, understand what is happening here. Every narration cited comes from the books your own scholars call the most authentic collections in existence after the Quran. The so-called Sahih Bukhari, Muslim, Sunan Abu Dawud. These are not weak narrations dug up from obscure collections. These are the foundations of traditional Islamic jurisprudence. The Hadith your Imams quote at every chance they get. If you have a problem with what follows, your problem is not with this video. Your problem is with these so-called authentic narrations. And you should have had that problem a very long time ago. Sahih Bukhari, Hadith number 368. Sahih Muslim, Hadith number 2189. Muhammad was bewitched. A Jewish man named Labid bin al-Asam took a comb with hairs from Muhammad's head, tied them with a string, and placed them inside the spathe of a male date palm in a well. The spell worked so powerfully that Muhammad would imagine he had done things he had not done. He was living inside a hallucination created by a man with a comb and some hair. An angel eventually came to reveal where the spell was hidden, and he had to physically retrieve the object from the well to break it. This is graded Sahih. It is not a marginal opinion. This is what the Hadith literature says about the Prophet through whom God delivered the final message to humanity. That a man with a comb made him unable to distinguish between reality and his own imagination. If we are to believe that, then how can we be sure that there are some verses in the Quran today that were not revelation, but rather hallucinated while under the spell? Sahih al-Bukhari, Hadith number 1682. Sahih Muslim, Hadith number 1671, the torture of the Urayna tribe. A group of men come to Medina, accept Islam, and later murder a shepherd and steal his camels. According to these narrations, Muhammad does not just order their execution. He orders their hands and feet to be amputated, their eyes to be branded and gouged out with heated pieces of iron, and then has them thrown out onto the scorching rocky ground of the Hara. The narrations explicitly state they were asking for water, but no water was given to them until they died. The actions of a cruel man drunk on power, rather than someone God defined as a mercy to all the worlds. Utilizing a method of slow, agonizing torture that contradicts every Quranic principle of justice and human dignity. Sahih al-Bukhari, Hadith number 538. Sahih Muslim, Hadith 788. Muhammad is in the mosque and hears a man reciting verses. According to the Hadith, Muhammad says, "May God bestow his mercy on him, as he has reminded me of such and such verses of such and such chapter which I'd forgotten." The man who is supposed to be the perfect, infallible vehicle for the final revelation is portrayed as dropping verses from his memory until a random man in the mosque reminds him of them. So what guarantee do we have that he did not forget other verses and now those verses are lost forever? Sahih al-Bukhari, Hadith 4138. Sahih Muslim, Hadith 4138. Companions on a military campaign away from home ask Muhammad, "Can we have sexual relations with the captive women and practice withdrawal so they do not get pregnant?" First of all, The Quran never tells women to be captured as prisoners of war, but for the Muhammad of Hadith does not have a problem with that. And he does not say these women are human beings, not property. He does not say this arrangement is forbidden. He gives a technical opinion on the contraceptive method, stating that no soul God has destined to exist will fail to come into existence anyway. That is the portrait. A prophet allowing sexual use of captive women and weighing in on withdrawal techniques. I know some viewers right now are already thinking of how to refute this. What apologetics to use, what verbal gymnastics to apply to explain it all away. But trying to explain these away does not help. The only thing that would help is if you expunge them entirely, but that cannot happen. Because if you remove one today, tomorrow another will fall, setting off a chain reaction. And very soon, this entire parallel religion based on man-made narrations will collapse like a house of cards. And we are not done yet. Let us look at some more. Sahih Muslim, Hadith 1403, Sunan Abu Dawud, Hadith 2151. Muhammad sees a woman and is struck by desire. He rushes to his wife's order as he cannot control himself and longer and instantly has relations with her. Then he tells his companions, when a woman comes toward you, it is the devil coming toward you. This is presented in the Hadith literature as prophetic guidance. What it actually presents is a man who sees a stranger on the street, is overcome by physical desire, acts on it immediately, and then calls the woman who triggered the response a devil. Sahih Bukhari, Hadith 6922. Man baddala dinahu faqtuluhu. Whoever changes his religion, kill him. This single narration has become the foundation of the apostasy death penalty in classical Islamic law. Entire legal schools built execution protocols around it, and it stands in direct, irreconcilable opposition to the entire Quranic framework of conscience and accountability, and the Quranic concept of lakum dinukum waliya din. For you is your religion, and for me is my religion, and la ikraha fi ad-din. There is no compulsion in religion. The man God described as only a reminder, not a controller over people, is presented here as having issued a blanket execution order for religious choice going directly against the teachings of the Quran. Sunan Abu Dawud, Hadith 4361. A blind man kills his concubine, the mother of his children, because she insulted the Prophet. He brings this before Muhammad, and the narration records Muhammad saying her blood was of no consequence. No punishment, no accountability. A woman is dead for her words, and the mercy to all worlds waves it away. These are the actions of a dictator running a fascist state, not a prophet of God. Sahih al-Bukhari, Hadith 5158, and Sahih Muslim, Hadith 1422. The marriage to Aisha. The age given in these narrations is 6 years at the time of the marriage contract and 9 years at the time of consummation. You are saying this is part of the authentic record of the most noble human being ever described in Scripture. And then you are asking the rest of the world to accept Islam. These two positions cannot be held simultaneously without catastrophic damage to the prophetic image. The people who insist these narrations are authentic are not defending Muhammad. They are dismantling him. The question every honest person needs to ask is whether God's description in chapter 68 or Bukhari's narration is the more reliable source. That is not a difficult question if you actually believe chapter 69 verses 44 through 46. What has been demonstrated here is not a collection of individual narrations that happen to be problematic. It is a system. This is the Muhammad of the traditions. A forgetful, bewitched, cruel man who has no control over his desires, torturing men with hot iron, condones murder of innocents, capital punishment for anyone who changes their faith. This is what 14 centuries of preservation, scholarship, and institutional authority have been protecting. This is what your Imam defends when he says the Hadith are the second source of Islam. This is what you are asked to accept as the authentic record of the man God called a mercy to all worlds. They are not the same person. They have never been the same person. Think about what that actually means in practice. The tradition handed us a king, a legend, a man with 11 wives, armies at his command, miracles at his fingertips, almost a deity in human form, a superhero of faith, But open the Quran and you find someone else entirely. A man trying his best to carry an enormous weight, not always succeeding, being corrected, feeling the grief of people not listening, worrying, struggling. A completely normal human being whose only distinction was the message he carried. And that is precisely what makes him trustworthy. Not the legends built around him, the very human reality the Quran preserves of him. Now ask the only question that matters. Who dishonors the Prophet more? The people who say these narrations cannot be about the man God described? Or the people who wrote them, graded them authentic, built a religion on them, and then called anyone who questioned them an enemy of Islam and a kafir? And if rejecting these blasphemous and degrading narrations makes Muslims who accept the Quran as the only source of the deen kafir in their eyes, then we will gladly accept that title. But just understand what is actually being said. Muslims are being called disbelievers for defending the Prophet's honor against books written by defeated Persians centuries after he passed away. Let that land. You think just by saying Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, may Allah send blessings upon him and grant him peace every time his name is mentioned, but yet accepting all what the Hadith says about him is honoring and respecting the Prophet. The fabricators knew exactly what they were doing. The Quran is too clean, too direct, too available to anyone who can read. It removes the middleman. And the middlemen were not going to accept that without a fight. So they built a second source, vast, contradictory, and technically impenetrable, requiring you to come to them for the answers. They hijacked Muhammad's credibility to build a system that replaced his actual message. If you want to know the real Muhammad, and what his actual authentic sayings are, and not the one falsely labeled as authentic through cooked-up systems by these same scholars like Usul al-Hadith and Al-Rijal, go back to the Quran. Over 330 times in the Quran, Allah says, "Say." And what follows are his actual words, authenticated by God directly, preserved in time forever. No chains of transmission, no narrators to grade, no scholars to reconcile the contradictions, no apologetics. Just God saying, "Here is what my messenger said." The Prophet told you he was human. He told you he followed only revelation. He told you there was no compulsion in religion. He told you the book in your hands was complete. His sayings are in the Quran right now, the authentic prophet of the authentic book. If you really want to honor him, follow the messenger, then read the message he was given by Allah to us. That is where God put him. And that is where he has been all along. Buried under 14 centuries of narrations that have nothing to do with him and everything to do with the people who needed to control what his name meant. If this comparison opened your eyes, share it with someone who is also searching for the prophet of the Quran.